everyone. Welcome to Strive Conversations. My name is Melissa Thi, and I'm the founder of Strive With Me and the host of Strive Conversations. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're actually going to do a fireside chat with urbanist, filmmaker, and storyteller Ariel, and discuss how we can reflect during this crazy time to better manage and cope and grow ourselves during this time. So thank you, Ariel, for spending the day with us, or spending this hour with us, I should say. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about yourself and how you've been adapting to this crazy time?
Yeah, my pleasure. So as you mentioned, I'm a filmmaker and storyteller, and for the past 3 years, I've done over 1,000 videos over 13 different cities around the world, covering all the different history of these places. And while covering all the history of these different places, I've come across many stories about disease and pandemics, which I've covered in a few different cities. And also, I've gotten many learnings of how cities work. So hence the name of my show, Urbanist. Um, how am I coping with the pandemic? I am luckily in a very privileged position where I don't need to worry about rent or about gathering too much income. So I'm in a pretty stable position. So I'm staying creative and still making content as much as I can.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I know for a lot of people, it's kind of funny because for many of us, we kind of no longer have that excuse of what it would be like if we had this time, because now we have the time. People are spending in different ways, right? And me and my friends have a saying, there's no judgment in a pandemic. So however it is that people need to cope, I very much understand and empathize with that. Some people need more time to focus on their mental health, focus on dealing with the stress of being their normal routine and life being disrupted. Others, such as yourself and myself, have been really excited to have this time to work on our creative projects and engage with different communities. So speaking of creating, I want to share a little bit of how this conversation actually came to be, quite literally. So a few weeks ago, you wrote an interesting post on Facebook on how we should take this time to reflect on ourselves and emerge out of this time better citizens. In it, you shared, and I quote, "If we are able to learn life lessons during this time of hardship in our individual lives, then we should consider doing the same when when there is hardship on a global scale. We have a choice both as individuals and as a global community to enact the biggest change that we will make our world a better place." Unquote. And so can I ask, what inspired you to write this post?
Yeah, so what inspired me is basically whenever we encounter issues in our own personal lives, we tend to always draw lessons from them. So we're able to learn something from even scraping our knee when we're like out skateboarding or playing sports to stubbing our toe in the morning. We can learn something from it. And
Mhm.
sometimes bigger things happen, like we lose a job or a relationship breaks up. So if we're able to learn about something on an individual scale, why not also take life lessons from something that's happening globally? I know that happens to me whenever I'm in the city and I experience the city in a different way because each city is different. I'm able to learn something about myself by being in that city. So same thing in terms of global crisis. So that's what inspired me. It made me think about the world in a different way, or at least bring new lessons to light by looking at this crisis as a way to learn something. Now, of course, as I mentioned, I am in a privileged position where I can do this type of thinking, this type of reflection. Not everyone's able to do that. But if you are in the same position as you and I are, then I think it's okay to get some learnings from this situation.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to dive into the lessons. Before I do that, I want to remind anyone that's watching live here on the Zoom and or on YouTube, if you have any questions for Ariel or myself, please feel free to add that to the chat. We'll love to help hear what you're thinking, what you agree, what you disagree, and or help answer any questions you may have. So back to you, Ariel. I want to really dive into those lessons a little bit more because you kind of observed and kind of studied a little bit of this, although you are not, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not a health professional.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see from your perspective, building the Urbanist as a content creator, as well as someone that is really interested in human behavior and things like that, such as myself. What lessons do you think we can learn about this, and why, and in this point in time?
Well, one of the biggest lessons I've noticed, especially going to huge cities like New York and London and Paris, I've seen so many people do things that are not necessarily necessary for them to go to the place. So I see a lot of places, people going to grocery shopping, people going to universities or classrooms, a lot of people going to places that can easily be done online. Something I learned from doing my 9 to 5 3 years ago, when was the last time I worked in the office, was how much unnecessary time was spent in the office when you can easily work from home or you can easily work anywhere you would like. So that came really into light for me. And seeing New York City, because I've been making videos of New York City empty, seeing New York City empty, I realized this is a gorgeous city that we have. Same thing with places all around the world, that we kind of been overstuffing with people because we haven't learned to embrace new technologies such as delivery systems. And we learned to kind of demonize companies like Amazon, which, yes, it has some faults, but I think the good things that it gives to the world really outweighs those faults because they're providing a logistical platform that's able to deliver anything to people all around the world, even the most remote places in the world. And that's why I learned mostly is how we can start changing the way we learn how to live in urban areas and in the world overall.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because I think in your post, I was really um, struck in, and it caused me to really reflect and think myself on what this time really means for all of us as a global community, right? Um, because of the lockdown, we're able to really kind of pull back, and for me, I see this time as a way to really reflect on what our priorities are, whether that's our health, our family, our creative projects, things that we want to pursue, those that are continuing to work. Of course, there's that transition to adjust to a more work from home method, and managing families. Similar to you, I'm privileged in the sense that I am kind of locked down by myself and have that creative space and peace and clarity. I very much empathize with my friends and colleagues and other people who don't have that privilege, and have to constantly keep their kids and families entertained. And I see all the funny TikTok videos and all this stuff. But I think it is very interesting that this time, for me, I see it as an optimistic, um, as a time to really reflect on what our priorities are and what really matters if we were to kind of break from that very hustle mentality. And you and I have kind of discussed
Mm.
being entrepreneurs, being creatives, loving to engage, being personal development nerds, which we'll get into a little bit later. This time is so exciting because we're able to really reflect on what really matters to us, and have that, so much use, I have that privilege.
Oh yeah, you make an excellent point that we are all in different places. And one thing I've learned, especially while traveling, is you are where you are. So regardless of the situation that you're in, if you're home alone or if you're home with family, if you're home with a significant other, if you're at the front lines, you are where you are. So you have to embrace that situation first, rather than resist against it.
Yeah, and I want to dive into kind of like the hustle mentality a little bit more, because I think for us, we, I know for me, like even reflecting on, even taking a look at my own apartment, like when I first moved in, I pretty much had a month to put this whole place together, which I didn't do a great job of. And now that I'm living in it, I kind of can feel the impact of it a little bit more, of not taking that time, right? But in that point in my life, when I first moved in, I had to move offices, and I was responsible for getting that office set up and things like that. And so I got into that really hustle and grind, working 12-hour days or whatever long that is. How do you think that will, like this time will affect the way we look at our work-life balance?
You know what? That it's interesting because most of the economy is at a standstill.
Hmm.
There's certain sectors of the economy which are going in full blast, like people developing vaccines and people developing surgical masks and ventilators. Yeah, but that's only a small percentage of the overall economy that's still going strong. The rest of it is slowed down. So you can hustle, but in a way, there's nothing to hustle towards because there's no business going on right now, or very little business going on right now. Um, so how to change that mentality? I think first of all, there's going to be millions upon millions of people that are going to realize that working from home is easy. It doesn't disturb or disrupt their work patterns, and it might actually enhance their productivity. So I think people are starting to see that work-life balance is much easier to obtain if you're more flexible in your workspace.
And from someone that I think you mentioned that it's been a few years since you've been to an office, and I believe we discussed that you mainly work from home. What are some things that you realize that has been really helpful in terms of transitioning into more time at home and staying creative and staying productive?
Oh yeah, the differences between being around people and then working alone at home. Yeah, they're pretty stark. You do have to kind of motivate yourself. You have to redefine your motivations, I think. Uh, I think a lot of us, the majority of our world works by selling their time. So you sell your time 8 hours a day to sit in the office, which is okay. It's totally it's a normal part of life for many people. But once you're working on your own, or definitely working from home, then you are not as much selling your time, but you're selling what you're actually producing, what actually comes out, the product or the video or the book or etc.
Mhm.
Um, that said, you have to remove your motivation. So the motivation by selling your time is to do the work that you're there in the office to do and make sure you're still doing it. And that motivation is usually more driven by, I gotta make sure that I don't look like I'm lazy, being lazy, or I gotta make sure I don't look like I'm slacking off because I'm still here in the office and they're right next to my shoulder, especially if it's an open office space. Um, but when you're at home, suddenly the motivation turns into like, I gotta make a good product. It might be, I gotta make a good product that sells and it makes money. Also, I gotta make a good product that I feel proud of. So that motivation changes a little bit, or at least the weights of the motivation changes.
Yeah, and I think that that's interesting because now I think that's one of the biggest things that um, kind of, as you mentioned, the transition of, or I guess the emergence of new technology and the convenience that it provides, right? A lot of friends are saying, yeah, this will be interesting at how this lockdown and how everyone had to transition to working from home will disrupt the new office, um, I guess, workplace setting, because a lot more people now, because they had to adapt really quickly, transition to allow their workforce to work from home. Um, once we kind of reemerge back in to our lives, probably before everything happened, I think a lot of people will kind of really reflect on the fact that, hey, can I do this job from home? And am I more focused at home than I am in the office? And I think you also brought up the aspect of accountability. Like now that your time is yours, how do you do that now that you don't have someone probably micromanaging you, like circling back? Your coworkers aren't tapping you on the shoulders to have a conversation and have a break and things like that.
Unless
Um,
if you're on Slack.
Unless you're on Slack, yeah. There's definitely that. But like for me, I kind of mute it, and I've gotten in trouble for not answering Slack right away. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, for me, text message and any kind of messaging platform is you were literally leaving a message. It's similar to like it's a new voicemail. It's like I'll get back to when I can. I can't answer it all the time because I don't keep breaking focus. Um, yeah, I definitely think that everyone being locked down and transitioning to a work from home would definitely disrupt how workforce go. A lot of off jobs will be going forward. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Like office jobs are going to change radically. And I think it's a good thing because think about all the pollution that is accumulated by commuting on a daily basis to your workspace. You're driving your car, or you're taking an Uber or a taxi to the train station. You're taking the train, you're taking the bus, and then you're getting home, and then you're getting to your workplace. All that is accumulating so much pollution in the air when that's not necessary. So that's one benefit of changing the way we think about our workspaces. But the other benefit is, especially in cities like New York, London, um, Rome, and Venice, these cities that are overcrowded with tourists, I don't think tourism is necessarily the bad thing. I think the bad thing is how we're balancing the amount of people we have in our cities, and that is based on work habits. So since we're stuffing so many people in these offices in Midtown Manhattan, as along with millions of tourists stuff in Midtown Manhattan, is causing this kind of um, breaking point in terms of how stuffed our cities are, and also that reflects in our own lives. So even commuting for an hour or two adds a whole lot of stress into your life. So
Yeah.
here, if I'm working from home, I wake up 6 a.m. here. Um, if I'm working from home, I can literally stay in my bed, read a book for 2 hours, and then start working at 9 a.m. and be really tranquil, make a good cup of coffee, make a really good breakfast like I did today, avocado toast. Felt so peaceful.
So New
But
York.
yeah, very New York. Yeah, you don't need to go to a fancy brunch place to
All
make
you
a good
need was
avocado toast.
a New York bagel and lax, and then you have the ultimate New York
Sure.
experience.
But you don't need to. But if I were to commute to the office today, 9 a.m., waking up at 6 a.m., I have to shower very quickly. I have to get dressed. I have to go on the train. I have to
And
like
that's a part of the
spend
hustle,
time.
that adrenaline rush, right?
But that adrenaline rush is kind of pointless if
Yeah.
you can work from home because you're expelling your energy in that commute. And commute, especially if you're driving, is much more stressful because you actually have to pay attention to the road. And a lot more people die from traffic accidents than they do of this current disease. So that's a good perspective of how stressful even driving is. That
Yeah,
said, that said, let me finish this point very quickly. That said, since we're rethinking about all these different factors, that puts into more light of how we can really live a better life, even if it is just working from home, or even if it is just minimizing office space and other things like that.
yeah, I think it's interesting because as a person that used to work in New York and used to commute 2 hours to the city during rush hour, you're right. It's very on brand with working in New York, where you're just kind of like, yeah, this is my commute. It is whatever. But it is also very strenuous on the mind, body, and soul because you are that utilizing that time, and a lot of your time is kind of on the road. Whether that's in a subway, whether that's on a bus, train, or anything like that. Can't imagine in a car.
So that's a good point about time spent because a lot of people now have noticed, just general observation, that they are kind of at a loss of what to do with this extra time that they're at home.
Yeah. You
So
didn't
natural
for the guy grabbing his shower rod dressed up in New York, like a New York commute. It was so good.
that's one of the most extreme examples. I bet there's a percentage of people out there living in denial and kind of adjusting these things. But also, what most people end up doing is like watching Netflix or kind of having happy hours on Zoom, other things like this, which inherently are not either a good thing or a bad thing. But I think if you're doing it out of boredom, then you never truly enjoyed your time in the first place. Even when you were in that hustle mentality where you can easily move anywhere around the city and business was as usual, if right now you are resorting to Netflix because you're dead bored, um, rather than maybe watching a movie out of pure joy, which you can do, but most people do it just out to kill time, that shows that the priorities were never there in the first place. And maybe it's time to change that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I definitely want to dive a little bit more into that. I think for me, something that has been really interesting since this lockdown, I've been a lot more productive and focused. That being said, I also had that time to kind of like, oh, yes, this is time to relax. I get to do whatever it is that I want. And I've been there where and I binge watch entire series, right? And so when this lockdown happened, I kind of, in a way, got that out of my system. And now it's like, like you can only Netflix so much. Like you can
Oh
only
yeah.
like nap and talk to your friends and some people were drinking a lot. Like you can only do that for so long until you're like, all right, I need to do something to feel better. And that's one of the reasons why I launched kind of like a motivation series on Strive With Me, is because um there are stages of this, right? There are stages where we like I wrote that article series based on my experience with depression and anxiety, like extreme anxiety and stress, where there were things that you can do when you're like still coping and handling everything, like how a lot of people were doing this at the beginning of the lockdown. And then there's a point where it's like, okay, now I'm at a stage where I'm ready to get productive and ready to kind of reemerge and figure out like who I am in this new stage in my life. And then going forward, like, all right, here are the hard decisions I really need to think about, unpack, and really try to kind of strive forward. Um, and so we kind of touched upon obviously workforce is going to change, tourism and travel and things like that is gonna be a little bit different, I imagine. Also, I imagine healthcare is going to be very different. Seeing the breakdown of that, I'm
Yeah.
curious to see how you think, what are other ways that this lockdown and everything that's going on in the world right now will affect our society and culture moving forward.
You know what? Even as you mentioned all these different points, I can tell what many people might be thinking just in general
Hmm.
is these are all different things, but they are not separate. Work, um, life balance, tourism, healthcare, uh, our cities, our agricultural logistic systems in terms of delivery, they're not all separate. They're not separate things. They're all changing in unison. They're actually all the same and they're all interconnected. Um, so what was your question again?
How do you think this lockdown and COVID is going to affect our society moving forward?
Yeah, that said, how's it going to affect our society since they are all interconnected? Well, right now, I think we're experiencing kind of a vacuum. So everything we got used to doing is now gone. So a lot of the time spent commuting, the time spent shopping for groceries at a physical location, the time kind of just chit chatting with friends at a bar, all that's kind of just been sucked out of our lives, and now we're forced to really be with ourselves in most cases.
Hmm.
Uh, Again, I'm not talking about the people on the front lines. There is a percentage of people doing are called to do a whole lot of work right now. But aside from that, a lot of us have been sucked out, and we're kind of forced to be with ourselves. And that said, since we're forced to be ourselves, we have to now we since we've been taken away from all these other distractions, we are now in a position where we have to either start making up new distractions, which, as we talked about, binging a series on Netflix, that could be a new distraction we take up, or happy hours on Zoom, which I'm
Hmm.
not saying is a bad thing, but it can end up being a distraction more than an
Hmm.
actual productive thing. And productive, I don't always mean in terms of business, but I also mean in terms of emotional productivity and
Yeah.
relaxation in
And personal
pers-
growth.
personal growth. Yes, exactly. And enjoy and fun.
Hmm.
Or we can change our priorities and focus on what we truly want in our lives, what we truly want to spend our time in a way that can be productive by providing value to people in the world and also just bring joy and relaxation into our lives. And those are not two separate things because they are intimately interconnected. We need both to do the other.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. I think for me, something that I've talked to with my friends and people that we kind of dove deeper and unpacked this ourselves. Um, for me, it's kind of a blessing in a sense that we are allowed to be more intentional with our time, with who we engage with what we give our attention, energy, and focus to. I think when we're in that hustle mentality, and I feel that most strongly when I am in the city, because everyone's kind of like head down and like I need to go somewhere, I need to do this. Because I wasted 40 minutes on the freaking subway and had to like walk another 20 minutes, right? Now we choose who we interact with, right? Like before, when we like, whether you're in an office, whether you're like running around, commuting or whatever it is, people interact with you, and you don't have as much as a choice, right? Like you're stuck in an environment with other colleagues. You may or may not enjoy the company or whatever it is. Now that everyone's kind of have their own space, yes, you can still have those like important calls and appointments and video calls and chats. That being said, I am now spending more time and attention on who I actually want to connect with. Like, how often am I calling my family? How often am I calling my friends? And who amongst my friends do I feel the most connected to and that I want to keep engaging, that gives me energy, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm an extrovert, but I do have really strong introverted tendencies. It's hard for me as an extrovert and a community leader because I can't physically like feed off of that energy. Like I can get really excited off my energy as a response to our conversation, for example, but I can't physically like feel like the buzzing that you normally get when you're interacting in person. Um, so like now I'm being more very deliberate and selective of who I spend time with. Even now, like there's so many great um uh group meetings and events and things like that that are taken online that are really exciting, like we may never have access to before, right? So like the sharp conversations we've had, like people from all over the world. We've had like two mother-daughter duos like coming on these chats. And like a lot of times now accessibility, like that barrier is kind of obliterated. At the same time, I have to find myself, hey, like, is this worth my time? Is this valuable to me? And you're able to put on that boundary, I think, a lot quicker because you're fully in control of your screens and different things like that.
Yeah, we are in control. So yeah, we can choose who we want to talk with and what we want to do, especially now in this time, since all that we got used to having is a lot less. We're able to really focus on what we want. And I think that said, this does affect us on a societal level. So on the societal level, it just reflects on what's going on the individual level, where we have to really change our priorities and we have to get really clear as to what we actually want. And one of those things I think with on the societal level is, well, let me talk a little bit about history, because
Hmm.
I recently covered the history of three major pandemics: the Justinian plague, the Black Death, and the Spanish flu of 1918. The interesting thing about those three pandemics is that they all occurred during times of war, and war actually helped in spreading the disease for all three of them. And that showed that war wasn't actually being constructive, was actually being very destructive. Of course, war is already destructive with people
Hmm.
killing each other, but
But
it's
it's
also
a
being,
whole business.
yeah, but it was also destroying civilians' lives by spreading disease and also destroying the economy because civilians were dying. Same thing right now. We have to kind of change our priorities, because why do our governments focus on war? For example, US and China focus on building tons and tons of warships and nuclear bombs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when we can really use that money in order for technology. We use that money to build not just an Amazon, but 10 Amazons that just have these massive logistical platforms, or providing internet as a utility. These things are now becoming more into light, where we now require these things on a societal level, as we do on an individual level.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. And I was watching the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, brought up that um, with everything that's going on, it's actually stopping a war. I can't remember which
Oh, yeah.
country that they're like, we're gonna stop like bombing you because we have to like fight this. Like he made a joke, it was like, oh, we'll resume like killing each other after we survive this because we're in this together right now. And you can kind of catch this, and I think it was his latest like good news on the daily social distancing show. But yeah, I think it is interesting that in many ways it is bringing people together a lot. I do see a lot more community initiatives coming together. I've talked to a lot of my friends that are saying, hey, like I'm looking to support um marginalized people that are heavily being suffered, like in Philadelphia. We are a minority majority city. That being said, a lot of Black and Brown folks are suffering greatly because of this, and I have friends that are mobilizing to support, whether that's like supporting financially, supporting with like helping them access groceries and different resources. I have another friend, actually Jimmy White, who is going to be speaking at the next Drive conversation, is going to shop for uh, military vets. And so I do see a lot more people kind of coming together and support any way I can. And that for me is really exciting as a social entrepreneur, as a community leader, to see and try to contribute to that.
Yeah, you know what? In a way, this crisis has forced us to look beyond ourselves. So
Mhm.
since a hustle mentality is very much a kind of a bubble we put ourselves in, where it has to be, I have to be successful, I have to be successful. And usually the driver behind the hustle mentality tends to be, I gotta be better than that other person, I gotta be better than that other business, or I gotta be better than that other organization. And that's what drives our hustle mentality. Yes, we have mission statements, and um, we have products that help the world. That is definitely important, but internally, on an individual level, we tend to be driven by that desire to be better than someone else. And that said, since we tend to be in our own bubble, this entire crisis kind of forced us to think about other people at large.
Mhm.
So, as you mentioned, your friend is helping people in need. And the same thing is happening right now with our elderly. The reason almost all of us are in quarantine is not because you and I are going to get sick. Chances of that is much lower, but the elderly can. Um, and people who are immunocompromised can as well. So we're thinking about them. And I think as a global society, we start to think about the other as much as we think about ourselves, and that we are not separate from the elderly, or separate from the immunocompromised or the homeless or the minority groups, that all of us is part of this societal fabric that helps everyone or can destroy everyone.
Yeah, and that's something I want to dive in deeper. Obviously, because of this time, we're able to be more intentional, and we're able to really kind of really focus on our priorities and things like that. Um, what do you think we can do as citizens to get more involved?
To get more involved, I think it depends on who you are. So, as I mentioned earlier before, you are where you are. So, do whatever feels good and feels easy for you to do. I am always been a fan of the path of least resistance. So, for me personally, the best thing I do is provide good, lighthearted entertainment to my 10,000s of viewers. That is definitely a good service to the world. You know, people do need some lighthearted entertainment or history to learn about.
Mhm.
Um, but if you are a person who can sew clothes, definitely make surgical masks if you can. If you're an engineer, definitely work in making better ventilators. Uh, I think do whatever you think you can do, but don't invalidate whatever you already do. I think that's the trap that happens, especially within our circles, because uh, this conversation we're having, most of the people listening to are not going to be really essential workers. So I assume we're not really speaking to people who are medical professionals right now. If you are, then rise to the call and be a medical professional. But since most of us are entrepreneurs and people who are not deemed essential at this moment, I would say do not invalidate the work that you already do, because that's the trap you can fall into, where you start thinking, oh, I'm useless, so I'm just going to play video games. Um, but no, you could do a lot of great things that can help the world. And there's countless examples. I know for me, providing entertainment can be very useful. Could be very useful to, I have, for example, a nurse who follows me in California, and I know she watches my shows after coming back from treating people with COVID-19. And to her, it's a great way to kind of relax and chill out for a little bit. And that means I'm providing a good service. So if you are a, say, entrepreneur who's dealt in financial systems like blockchain or cryptocurrency, find ways that you can help people in need with cryptocurrency, or find ways that you can change the economical structure. For example, Isaac Newton, back in the, I think he was alive in the 1600s, if I remember correctly. He lived during a time of disease and plague, and he was kind of forced to stay at his home for many weeks. And while he stayed at his home, he innovated the ideas of physics. The very basis of actual science we have nowadays was built upon Isaac Newton being bored at home and forcing to work in his math. So even if you're stuck at home and you're working at something that's not directly affecting someone right here, right now, at this very moment in time, it can have a massive impact in the future. So do what you can, whatever that is, and do it well.
Yeah, I think that was beautiful. I just want to dive a little bit more into the personal development part, because I think we've focused a lot on society. We focus a lot on what we can do as community, which I think is amazing. I'm curious to see, as I mentioned, we're both a part of this great group called Personal Development Nerds. What areas are you personally work on during this slow time?
Yeah, so personal development it doesn't stop even in global crisis.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I feel like if anything, it drove up. It's like now I get to unpack my mental models. Now I get to like really sit and meditate and reflect. Like now's the time to work on your personal development.
I think what I'm doing personally is relaxing, is embracing true relaxation and taking this moment of economic standstill, at least for my industry, which is creative arts. Um, there's not that much films being made or so much concerts being filmed like I do on a freelance basis. So I'm taking this moment to kind of relax and kind of really meditate deeply. Um, and that has a really big impact on me, because what I've learned is on a normal day-to-day life, I used to have so much stuff running through my mind and thinking that I needed to do so many things. There was so many shoulds in my mind, that kind of letting all that go and just really embracing the crisis, really embracing the isolation, and just being in stillness with myself, not paying attention to the hamster wheel of life, has been really feeling great. And I've noticed really big changes in my own life. So I think in terms of personal development, just like as I mentioned with productivity, do whatever you can. Um, and if you can meditate, do meditate. If you can do yoga, do yoga. If you can dance at home, dance at home. But there's many different ways and modalities of personal development that you can do at home. but just do the thing that feels good. Because I think a lot of people think that personal development is focused around suffering, focused around beating yourself up, you know. I think we tend to, especially if we grew up in the Christian background, we tend to have that idea in the back of our heads of Jesus Christ on the cross, suffering, bloodied up. But that's not the core teaching of even those religions. You don't need to suffer for your sins, which might be, in personal development terms, you don't need to unpack all your past traumas. You can have fun. You can relax or have fun or watch the birds pass on by your window, or you can enjoy a good movie. I mentioned before that maybe movies can be a distraction, but if you find a truly joyful movie, you can enjoy it, really deeply enjoy it. Or you can chat with a friend like we're doing right now and having a good, deep conversation. I think those are the things that help our personal development the most, the things that feel good.
Yeah, it's interesting because before you went into like, oh, it doesn't have to be painful and suffering. For me, I've kind of taken this time and liberty to unpack a lot of that, actually, like really reflect on like, why do I behave this way now that I have like the mental space, um, and and in many sense, like you mentioned, the privilege to kind of really like understand myself. Um, it is for me, it is uncomfortable. I don't think I'm unpacking all of my trauma, like all of it. But I think like I think that friction, that discomfort is and for me it's been good because I'm able to understand, and I have great people in my network such as yourself to really kind of spark these kind of thoughts and conversations on how can we take it a level deeper, how can we level, like for me I think of personal, like our personal development journey, I'm starting to think of it like a video game, like what do we need to do to level up and grow, but in order to do that we kind of need to dig deeper. It's kind of like, I imagine, like I don't play a whole lot of video games, so excuse me if these references are wrong, but it's similar to like Super Mario, like he keeps going deeper and deeper into the pipes or whatever it is, and those are his leveling up, even though it's physically going downwards, I believe it is. And so for me, it's very similar, where I'm able to really reflect on like, like what are my relationship habits? What are my mental models? How do I look at myself? What judgments do I pass on myself as a human being, as a creative, as a community leader and entrepreneur? So for me, it's been an like exciting time to find that balance between like self-love and care and acceptance at the same time of like, why do I do this? Like what part of that do I need to fix and what part of that do I need to accept?
Yeah, you know what? Speaking about that, most of our best ideas, you'll hear this from countless people. They say that they get their best ideas in the shower. Uh, I know I have. I know many other people, countless,
I come
say
up with my
that.
best dance moves in the shower.
There we go. So you come up with dance move, which is good. It still illuminates to the same thing where we tend to get great ideas and we tend to kind of learn about ourselves in moments of peace. So whenever we're in the shower or we're sitting on a park bench watching the birds pass by or the sunset, we those kind of things we've had packed deep inside, that junk we've had packed deep inside, or those things we have forgotten that we should remember once again, tend to arise in those moments of stillness and in those moments of peace and joy. So it's not always work, work, work in terms of personal development. It doesn't always have to be, I gotta get my journal, I gotta write down my traumas, or I gotta do a hypnosis session, or I gotta like consult with a therapist. I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Action steps. Doesn't always have to be that way. It's okay to do it that way sometimes, but I say there's also another way, which is kind of enjoying the peace, and those things that will bubble up will definitely bubble up,
Hmm.
because it has happened to me while meditating. I point there because that way is my bed, and
Thank
I spend a few.
you for the context. I was a little confused. Like, why is he pointing at his lamp?
the light, I put in a very soothing lighting setting, so it's even
Fair
better.
enough. Fair enough. People pay good
Uh,
money for that.
but yeah, I've spent like many hours just in my bed, kind of meditating and even falling asleep and napping. But while doing that, tiny little things about what I want to improve have bubbled up. I've realized, oh my God, yeah, I kind of have that weird belief that I have to move past by and kind of grow from. Or yeah, I have that quirk which I actually don't need anymore. Let me just move beyond that.
Mm,
And that does bubble up even in that moment of peace or napping.
yeah, and I think that's some of the things that I've been reflecting on as I write more about personal development and reflect on myself is what what behaviors, beliefs, and habits are serving you, and what is not no longer serving you that you can kind of let go of. Like for me, I believe that some relationships, and that for me it includes friendships, romantic, social, personal, whatever it is, right? Some relationships um, come at a certain time, and they're meant to just be there at a certain time, and a lot of us try to resist and hold on to that comfort and belief and that stability, or that the disbelief, this delusion that this is a stable comfort zone. um but some people, some beliefs, some habits, some behaviors, they no longer serve us. Like if we were looking at extremes, like when we're younger, we used to like suck our thumbs for comfort. We don't need to do that anymore, right? There are some beliefs that like you kind of grow out of and allow yourself to grow out of, whether that's like, oh, I need to be able to drink to engage with people, or I need to like um spend a lot of money to connect with people and show, like, impress my friends by buying them lavish things. Like they not like as you grow, and especially as you grow deeper and further along your personal development journey, um, you start to realize like these beliefs don't matter for you. Like, and I know that another example that people might relate to is that women I've talked to, when they come to their 30s, like it's a completely different mindset, right? It's a completely different mindset that I need to go out of my way to please others, to delight my friends, to change myself for a potential partner or suitor or whatever. And the women there's like, nah, fuck this shit. Like, I'm just gonna do what makes me happy. I'm gonna spend my money on what's comfortable and what matters to me. And so, to your point, I think it is important to think like, okay, what is working for me now, and what no longer does, and kind of let go of that and kind of readjust as you go.
Yeah, you can, as you said, you can let go of anything you want to let go of. We're not stuck to anything at all. Even your personality, even the essence of who you are, even that could change in the
Mhm.
moment. That's what actors do, or that's what a writer does when he's writing. That could change at any moment. So if you can do that in acting, you can do that in your own life. You can change any belief, any quirk, any any essence of who you are in a moment like that.
Amazing. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to share it in our chat box. We're going to wrap up with Ariel. So can I ask, like, what are you striving for?
What I'm striving for is making quality entertainment that will attract a bigger audience. So just giving more better entertainment to bigger audiences. And that is taking shape in two ways. I am taking YouTube more seriously. So you can find more of
Mm,
my videos at Urbanist History of Cities. Uh, that I'll be taking more seriously once I start getting out of my house, because most of my videos are dependent of me actually going to places.
fair.
Uh, but the second thing is making movies. So my dream has always been to make sci-fi movies, and I'm already writing my first sci-fi screenplay.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Congrats. Congrats for taking that leap and actually pursuing that. I think a lot of us have those like high goals that we're so afraid to take the first step or just go into. So congratulations for
Thank you.
like getting to that place where you can act upon that. I think that's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes.
And thank you for
So
hosting this conversation. It was such an
absolutely.
awesome blast.
Absolutely. It was well, thank you to you for inspiring the conversation topic. I think your posts are amazing. I've shared a couple of the links in the YouTube description and different things like that. So if you're interested in following Ariel, there's more information there. We very much believe that it's important to give as much as you take. Now that you've given us time and we've taken your time, we would love to learn what we can give to you in return and how can we help you.
Yeah, so one thing I really have my eye on is writing a musical, though I have no musical talent in terms of composing music. So
Okay.
I am looking for collaborators on anyone who is also interested in collaborating on making a musical on the music end, because I definitely am down. I already have a few story ideas for the story end.
Amazing. And so you're looking for composers.
For composers, yeah, musical composers.
Are there
It's
specific themes
specific themes.
or like
It
genre?
is, I would say, I don't want to say too much about my idea unless if I talk to
Oh,
someone personally, but I would say it's very similar to Hamilton and very similar to Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever information you want to share with us that we can help narrow the search, we're happy to keep that in mind. I think we discussed in our conversation that I know a few musicians and artists in New York, so happy to connect you.
Oh, awesome.
And hopefully through those connections, you can connect with someone there.
Very cool. Amazing.
Amazing. So thank you so much for your time. We look forward to seeing the debut of your musicals and plural musicals and your sci-fi movie. I hope it's not about this pandemic because I've had people that are like writing, like, oh, I was writing about something very similar to this lockdown, but now it's a little too close. I think I need to pause on that. I think it's too soon to talk about it. And I was like, no, go for it. If anything, it might provide people some comfort and or
I
spark
think it will.
conspiracy theories. I don't know.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for everyone that's watching. Next week, we're having an extraordinary community leader, honored veteran Jimmy White the fourth, was talking about character building. So there's a invite page, there's an event page on our description. So hope to see you next time on Shrine Conversations. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.